The cafeteria aboard the Coalition station hummed with the usual midday activity. Representatives from a dozen species gathered in clusters, their conversations blending into a cacophony of clicks, whistles, and modulated tones. The Vexery sat apart from the others, their crystalline forms catching the light as they discussed trade agreements. The Coolish occupied the central tables, their four arms gesturing emphatically as they debated military protocols. And there, by the entrance, stood Myra. She clutched her meal tray with trembling fingers, her eyes scanning the crowded room. Her appearance marked her as different. Half Terran, half Drexian, she bore the angular features of her mother's people alongside the softer contours of humanity. Her skin held a faint blue undertone, and her eyes reflected light like polished metal. To the pure-blooded species that dominated Coalition space, she was an aberration. Captain Ross noticed her hesitation from across the room. He had arrived at the station 3 weeks prior, assigned as the human liaison to the Coalition's diplomatic corps. In that short time, he had observed much that troubled him about the supposedly enlightened alliance of worlds. Myra took a step toward the nearest table. The Drexian officers seated there immediately stiffened. One of them, a male with the rank insignia of a commander, raised his hand in a stopping gesture. "The hybrid may not dine among the pure," he announced, his voice carrying across the sudden silence that had fallen over the cafeteria. "She knows the protocols." Myra's shoulders sagged. Without a word, she turned and walked toward the exit that led to the exterior observation deck. The temperature there hovered just above freezing, and the deck offered no seating, no tables. Nothing but the cold metal floor and the vast darkness of space beyond the transparent barrier. Ross watched her go, his jaw tightening. This was not the first time he had witnessed such treatment. Throughout the station, those of mixed heritage occupied the lowest positions. They cleaned the corridors, maintained the life support systems, and performed tasks deemed beneath the pure-blooded species. And they ate alone, separated from their supposed colleagues by invisible walls of prejudice older than human spaceflight. He stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. Several nearby conversations faltered as he picked up his tray and followed Myra toward the exit. "Captain Ross," a Vexery administrator called out, her tone sharp with warning. "You should not go there. The hybrid dining area is not suitable for Coalition officers." Ross paused at the doorway, glancing back at the speaker. "Then perhaps we should change what we consider suitable." He stepped through before anyone could respond. The cold hit him immediately, seeping through his uniform. Myra stood at the far end of the deck, her tray balanced on the railing as she ate quickly, methodically, her breath misting in the frigid air. She looked up as he approached, surprise and alarm flashing across her features. "Sir, you should not be here," she said quickly. "The regulations state that mixed heritage personnel must use separate facilities during meal periods. Your presence violates protocol." Ross set his tray down beside hers on the railing. "I reviewed the protocols. They say nothing about where humans may eat. I choose to eat here, but the others will. Let them say what they want." Ross opened his meal container, the steam from the hot food dissipating rapidly in the cold air. "I am not interested in participating in customs that treat people as lesser based on their parentage." Myra stared at him, her metallic eyes wide. "Do you understand what you are doing? The Coalition has maintained these traditions for centuries. The pure-blooded species believe that mixing heritage dilutes the strength of their civilizations. They will not simply accept your defiance." "Good," Ross said calmly, taking a bite of his food. "I would hate for them to miss the point." Behind them, the cafeteria had erupted into chaos. Ross could see through the transparent wall as officers from multiple species gathered, pointing and gesturing with obvious agitation. The Drexian commander who had turned Myra away was speaking rapidly into his communicator, his movements sharp with anger. Within minutes, the station's director of operations arrived at the observation deck. Administrator Krell was coolish, his species known for their rigid adherence to hierarchy and tradition. His forearms crossed in a display that signaled extreme displeasure. "Captain Ross, you will return to the proper dining facility immediately," Krell demanded, his translator rendering his words in clipped, precise English. "Your actions dishonor the protocols established by the Coalition founders." Ross finished chewing before responding. "Director Krell, I am eating my lunch with a colleague. I fail to see how this dishonors anyone. The hybrid is not your colleague. She is support staff, assigned to maintenance duties because her mixed heritage makes her unsuitable for positions of authority or dignity. You lower yourself by associating with her in this manner." Myra had gone very still, her face carefully blank. Ross could see her hands gripping the edge of the railing, her knuckles pale beneath her blue-tinted skin. "I see," Ross said quietly. "And tell me, Director, what has Myra done to deserve such treatment? What crime has she committed?" "She exists as a violation of natural order," Krell replied, as if this were obvious. "Her parents defied the separation of species. Their union produced an individual who belongs to no proper category, who carries the traits of two peoples, but the full strength of neither. The Coalition allows such individuals to exist, to work and contribute, but they cannot be granted the privileges of the pure-blooded. This is not cruelty. This is reality." Ross set down his utensils carefully. "On Earth, we had similar beliefs once. We divided people by heritage, by ancestry, by the color of their skin or the land of their birth. We created elaborate hierarchies, convinced ourselves that some humans were naturally superior to others. Do you know what we learned, Director?" Krell's arms shifted impatiently. "I do not require a history lesson from a human. We learned," Ross continued, his voice hardening, "that such beliefs were not just wrong, they were poisonous. They weakened us, divided us, and nearly destroyed us. It took centuries and countless suffering to overcome that poison. And now I find that the supposedly advanced Coalition practices the same ignorance we abandoned generations ago. You dare to judge our traditions?" Krell's voice rose, and more observers had gathered beyond the transparent barrier, their faces pressed close to watch the confrontation. "I judge any system that treats someone as inferior because of circumstances beyond their control," Ross replied. "And I will not participate in it." "Then you will be removed from your position," Krell snapped. "The Coalition does not require liaisons who refuse to respect our ways. So be it." Ross picked up his tray and reached for Myra's as well. "Come on, we will finish eating somewhere else." Myra looked between Ross and Krell, her expression torn. "Captain, you are sacrificing your career for this." "For me? Why?" Ross met her eyes steadily. "Because it is right. And because someone has to show this alliance that humanity will not accept injustice, no matter how many centuries it has been practiced." He walked past Krell, heading back toward the main corridor. Myra hesitated only a moment before following. The aftermath came swiftly. Within hours, formal complaints had been filed by representatives from 7 species. The human ambassador was summoned for emergency meetings. Ross was confined to quarters, pending an investigation into his violation of Coalition protocols. But something unexpected happened. Other humans stationed throughout the Coalition began following Ross's example. In cafeterias across 36 stations and ships, human personnel began eating with the mixed heritage workers. They sat with them in common areas, included them in recreational activities, and refused to acknowledge the social barriers that had stood for centuries. The Coalition leadership convened emergency sessions. Some called for the immediate expulsion of all human representatives. Others argued for stricter enforcement of the traditional protocols. But a few voices, quiet at first, began to question whether customs that provoked such resistance could truly be just. Vexery Scholar published a controversial analysis comparing the Coalition's treatment of mixed heritage individuals to several historical atrocities. A Coolish officer resigned in protest after witnessing a hybrid engineer whose innovations had saved his ship being forced to eat in a cargo bay. Cracks began to appear in the centuries-old consensus. 3 weeks after the incident, Ross was released from confinement. He found Myra waiting outside his quarters, her posture uncertain. "They have changed the protocols," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Mixed heritage personnel are no longer restricted to separate facilities. We can eat in the cafeterias. We can apply for positions previously denied to us. The Council claims it is a trial program, but everyone knows it is because of what you did. What all the humans did." Ross nodded slowly. "It is a beginning." "Only that? Why did you do it?" Myra asked again. "You risked everything? For people you barely knew? For a problem that was not yours?" Ross considered the question. Beyond the viewport, stars wheeled in their ancient patterns, indifferent to the small dramas of the beings who traveled between them. "Because we are all we have," he said finally. "Humanity learned that lesson the hard way." We are Scattered Acros. If you enjoyed this video, consider supporting us.